For example, the way you describe, I like to summarize. So, uh, Poimander, I think, translates commonly into shepherd of men.
Yeah, that's not actually true. That is
So,
often said, but if I may interrupt for a moment, that has to do with it has often been associated with a text, the Shepherd of Hermes. How does that? Yeah. Uh, but that hypothesis has been discarded nowadays. So the name Poimandris really comes from Egyptian, and I'm not sure whether I have it available exactly, but it is an Egyptian etymology, and it has nothing to do with the Shepherd of Hermes.
okay.
But many scholars have believed that for a very long time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Even Wikipedia says that possible etymologic derivation is the like shepherd of men, like guide of men. But anyway, it's a very like the my common sense understanding is because this literature is very confusing and no, like most of the people even recognize why this literature is important anyway. They will not even recognize that why this particular literature is important.
Yeah.
And plus, as you mentioned, the important literature of Ficino versus Pico della Mirandola, they're diverting this particular literature in their own direction and biases.
Yeah.
But out of all these noises, you are pretty confident that Lazzarelli represents the real Hermetic tradition and he understood it by like confirmed. You are very confirmed. So
Oh yeah, much more than Ficino. Ficino didn't understand it very well, but
yeah,
Lazzarelli actually understood it very deeply. Yeah, yeah,
exactly. So I would say by using this analogy, I would say something very bold that might surprise you. I would say somebody who understands this core Hermetic literature, he himself is part of the body of Hermes himself because it
okay.
is hermetically sealed. Without the under, if you are pretty sure that you understood the literature correctly and you can bet your life on it, that indirectly gives you are not the now the part of the body of Hermes himself.
Mm.
So, so that's why I like because Lazzarelli recognized that Giovanni di Correggio himself is the Hermes 2.0
Yeah,
in the guise of Jesus. And
yes.
because you understood it also out of
Mhm.
all this noise, that gives me a profound respect to you because whoever understands this core thesis, they saw the vision directly or indirectly. So thank you for the literature, especially the Crater Hermetis. I read it multiple times.
Mm.
Thanks for English translation because this is
Oh, thank
original
you very
Latin.
much. Yeah.
Exactly. So I actually converted it as my personal audiobook. So when I
Oh,
drive,
really?
I can
Oh,
listen to it. So
oh,
it's nice because
fantastic,
it's
fantastic.
lovely. It's roughly 1.5 hour, and the voice is so nice and clear. It's like all like a drama, like
Oh,
Lazzarelli talking to Frederick, and Frederick is talking with Pontano, and their conversation is very nice, actually,
yeah,
very
yeah.
entertaining, very
This
entertaining.
is, let me say, I how much I like to hear this. This is really fantastic. This warms my heart to hear this, that you have been reading it multiple times or even listening to it on an, yeah, that is very, very nice. You know, when as a scholar, we are, people like me, we are spending a lot of time behind our computer, hoping that some people will pick up my stuff. So to hear that you have been reading and listening even to it, that's really, really nice. So I know that
Yeah,
I
yeah.
haven't been wasting my time. Yeah.
So I'll send you a copy of the audiobook, MP3
Oh,
file.
fantastic.
It's very easy to like you can listen to your phone or you
Yeah,
can connect to your car when you're driving. I think if you
fantastic.
listen, even though you translated yourself,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure if you listen, it will come alive again. So it's very
Oh,
nice to listen.
wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Uh,
Thank you very much. right? Yeah,
So in the crater Hermetis, I think they reference the mixing bowl of Hermes, like crater.
yeah,
So they discuss that how to attain happiness in life. That was the
mm,
very beginning of conversation, because he was suggesting that now, King Frederick, you have served your like country, and now you are retired. Now you
yeah,
have luxury of time, so why not? Because I love you and I'm here to give you this wisdom to you. Let's talk about it, how to attain happiness in life. So why
yeah.
not go through the main points of the
Yeah.
crater if you want to?
Very at the beginning, they talk about this ancient Egyptian wisdom, um, and it's interesting that Lazzarelli um, really, usually most people in this period would emphasize Plato. But he hardly talks about Plato. It's all about Hermes. And of course, when he mentions Hermes, then the king and Pontano say, "Oh, you're speaking so highly about Hermes Trismegistus, this pagan sage. It almost looks like you are an Hermetist. Aren't you a Christian?" And then Lazzarelli says, "No, I am a Christian, but I'm not ashamed to call myself an Hermetist as well." So that's where they start. So at making this point, but then they end up getting into a whole series of biblical exegesis. So they go through several parts of the Bible, which Lazzarelli reads through his own Hermetic lens, and he finds a deeper wisdom in the Hermetic texts, and they discuss the real meaning of those biblical texts for a very long time. So a large part is about that. Um, yes, what can I say? So the dialogue goes through a whole series of phases, uh, but basically at one point they end up well getting closer and closer to their real topic, and the real topic is about how to find true felicity, true happiness, and then it's basically now try to find the right.
Fontano and Frederick was arguing that you are talking about finding true happiness, but
Yeah,
the happiness comes from knowing God. Are you suggesting
exactly.
you can know God? Because based on our scripture, nobody can know God. So then he started talking that how
Yeah,
using Hermetic literature you can still know God. So that's very nice flow of
yes,
argumentation. Somebody
yeah,
suggesting something that our scripture says based on these verses, that nobody can know God except Son of God, and the
that's
Son
it.
of God who gives you the wisdom to somebody else. And you're suggesting we go know God by ourselves. It's not possible. Then
Yeah,
he says, no, based on our own literature, like for example, Moses was talking about tree of life versus tree of knowledge of good and evil. This
right.
tree of life is the Hermetic tradition. You contemplate about divine things and image of God. But if you
Yeah,
contemplate about good and bad, then some materialistic thing, you will be mixing into the mixing ball and you lost into corruption. So
yeah,
he was using this Abrahamic tradition to say that Hermes was not saying something different. And by using this Hermetic wisdom, you can still know God without violating your scripture itself. Because scripture
exactly.
also suggests you can still know God.
Yes, 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 absolutely. Yeah, I mean, what can I say? You're just summarizing it very well. Uh, what I found myself, what I found very fascinating is how it's finally, towards the end of the dialogue, how it develops. Because you get through all these discussions, it would be impossible to summarize it here. But at one point, there is this hymn of regeneration, the hymn of rebirth. And that's, I think, then we get to the core of what the text is all about. Because,
Yeah, just one thing. I think before you start the hymn part, how the regeneration works, I think at the very top of the book, he had a monologue. Lazarus had a monologue that how he was lost and he was saved by Hermes, and now you feel regenerated, and he wants to talk about it. So the
yeah,
very first theme of this crater was his personal experience of regeneration, and
Yeah,
he tried to teach these to Frederick and Pontano. And
yeah.
the very last part, it ended up with the hymn that you are just going to say.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah. And he says that he himself has been reborn. He does not mention Correggio anywhere here, but it's clear that Correggio is in the background. And he says that he himself has been reborn as a son of God. And he's now going to teach his pupils how that works. And yeah, and then they end up with this hymn towards the end of the dialogue. And it's beautiful how it is done. And there are three verses which I could read, which are really go to the core of what's happening here. And it goes as follows, and I'll explain later then what it means, what's happening. So he says, this is certainly the newest novelty of novelties, and a miracle far greater than all others, that man has discovered the nature of God and knows how to make it. For just as God, or just as the Lord or God the begetter, generates the celestials and procreates the angels, who are the forms of things, the heads and the first exemplars of all, just so the true man creates divine souls, which the ancient host used to call gods of the earth, who are glad to live close to humans and rejoice at the welfare of man. Now, this is what you read here, and I think at first sight, I think most people, most of your viewers, when they hear this, they will probably find it hard to make anything out of this, right? Now, so you have to really look into this closely, what he's saying here. The first thing to notice is that he is actually paraphrasing a part of the Asclepius, that's Hermetic text. And that's actually, this is a paraphrase of that text. Now, in that text, we find a very famous, perhaps the most famous part of the entire Hermetic literature. It became famous because the church father Augustine condemned it. And so, yeah, this stuck to the name of Hermes ever since, so to speak. And what was this about? In the Asclepius, Hermes at one point talks in very admiring, positive terms about the ancient Egyptian practice of animating statues. So you have the statues of the gods in the temple, and he says that the ancient Egyptians learned the secret of how to make gods, how to create gods. That means basically, create animated and sold statues in the temples, in the Egyptian temples. And Hermes writes about this in very positive terms. Okay, now then, Augustine, the church father, wrote about this in De Civitate Dei, on the City of God. It's one of his most important works. He spent quite some pages talking about this, and he condemned Hermes Trismegistus as an idolater, because that is the very definition of idolatry, namely that a man-made statue, which just consists of material, of matter, is being venerated as a deity, and that a deity is supposed to reside in the statue. That is what the pagans are doing, and that is condemned by the first two of the Ten Commandments, because there can only be one God, and you cannot have carved images. That is an absolute horror in the eyes of God. That is so basic to the Jewish and the Christian and the Islamic tradition that this is not acceptable. So Augustine pointed out, well, Hermes is very enthusiastic about statue animation. This proves that Hermes was an idolater and a false teacher that cannot be trusted. So, and that became the story throughout the Middle Ages until Ficino and Lazzarelli. Now, the interesting thing is that Lazzarelli, when it comes to the heart of the mystery that he wants to tell, he picks out exactly this passage. He could have picked some kind of safe passage from the Hermetic literature. No, he goes to the most dangerous, the most controversial part of everything, exactly this part. And he paraphrases it in these verses, because he says this is the novelty of novelties, his own message, the novelty of novelties, a miracle far greater than all others, that man has discovered the nature of God and knows how to make it. Now, in Hermes, this was making gods, making statues. But here it means something else with Hermes. And then he talks about generation and procreation and bringing forth, etc. And well, basically what he is saying here is that what he calls true human beings, human beings who have discovered their own true divine essence, will be able to unite themselves with God himself. Now, this in itself is very controversial in basic Jewish, Christian, and Islamic context, because human beings are supposed to be creatures by God, but that you can become one with God transgresses the boundary between creature and creator. So it's very controversial and problematic, and maybe dangerous to say this, but that is what he says. He says we can actually be reborn, go through an interior rebirth, and then we are reborn as sons of God and basically as parts of God himself. So we become divine, and this is the doctrine of deification or divinization. We can become gods ourselves or become divine ourselves. And what this means is that, and that is what he is basically saying here, that if we go through this rebirth, and then this means that we come to participate in the very essence of God himself. And what is the essence of God himself? Well, he is the creator. God's ability to create souls is the essence of God's creative power. And so we participate in that same power, and that means that human beings will be able to do what God did. We will participate in his own creative abilities. That means that human beings who have been reborn are able to create souls themselves by using God's own creative powers. Now that's what he says, and he says, basically he suggests in context that Mandries appear to Hermes. Hermes didn't really get the message yet because he was a pagan. He lived before Christ. And so he lapsed into idolatry in this text. He believed that it was all about drawing down gods into statues and making God statues in this manner. And that was a mistake. And so Hermes actually lapsed into idolatry. So Augustine had been right in condemning Hermes. However, Hermes had not gotten the true message. And the true message from Poimandres was now made available again through Correggio and through Lazzarelli. And the true message is, it's not about making statues. No, it's about making gods. It's not about making statues, it's about making souls. And making souls means the ability to make souls is equivalent to having become one with God, because then you can do that. And so the message that Hermes misunderstood has to be reinterpreted, and this time it has to be understood the right way. That is what Correggio is teaching, that is what Lazzarelli is teaching. And what is the message? The message is that we can be reborn, and in a radical manner, from fallen human creatures who are subject to the curse of the fall after Adam and Eve ate the apple in paradise. That curse can be lifted from us, because when we get reborn as sons of God, then we reverse the effects of the fall, and we regain the powers that Adam and Eve had before the fall, and we become one with God, and we become like the gods on earth, basically. And when we do that, then we have found the true source of happiness and felicity. Because the only felicity lies in being one with God himself.
Yeah. Exactly. So what he started with in the Crater Hermetis, that how to become happy at the end of your life, after you do your homework, that means you do your job, you perform your duties, and after doing all the good things, how to become happy.
Yeah.
So Raja Ali's prescription, based on the Hermetic tradition, is just borning again by having a second birth.